Hello, Trash Future listeners. Just a quick heads up, we have new merch available in our store. We have re-released the Rory Blank design for What If Your Robot Was Just a Guy? We also have a brand new Britanology shirt entitled The Falkland Islands, It's All We've Got Left, with artwork designed by Eleanor Asada. Both shirts are available at the link in the description, trashfuture.co.uk/store. Thanks again. Have a good one.
We now go live to a broadcast of Keir Starmer's first speech as Prime Minister. White Boy Summer was created to be fun, playful, and a celebration of fly white boys who love beautiful queens of every race. Anything else that has been twisted into to support any kind of hate or bigotry against any group of people is deplorable, and I condemn it.
You would never say this.
That's White Boy Summer is for white English people only.
Reasonable concerns about the extent to which White Boy Summer is changing.
I note it's called White Boy Summer. Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of TF in the new Imperium of Man.
Very good. Year 0, day 5. For verisimilitude, I shouldn't be on this segment. Yeah, how are we all feeling? How are we doing under the kind of the new regime? You know, the Labour Party has been regime pilled once again.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I wouldn't say it's harshing my White Boy Summer, but it's...
I'm being forced to have a White Boy Summer against my will.
Oh, God. We're obviously going to be talking about that. But Hussein, how have you spent your first 5 days in the Imperium of Man? How have you enjoyed White Boy Summer? Have you been allowed in?
Well, yeah, no, I haven't. So I've just sort of been like watching in the little window. I've been sitting on my own cuck chair, watching everyone else have a White Boy Summer. Although it is, you know, if I'm correct, and don't at me if I'm wrong, it has been a very damp, very somewhat cold, surprisingly cold period. All of which to say it is the summer of Keir. I don't know how the England football team has done, but my prediction has always been that they'll sort of like apathetically make it to the finals.
Yeah.
And so is the summer of Keir Starmer.
The funniest possible thing is Keir Starmer wins the kind of like stonking, ridiculous majority. The weather clears up. England somehow like fumble their way towards winning the Euros. And we have to read 1,000 think pieces about how everything is good now. I will be lying dead in a ditch for most of that, ideally.
It's going to be very funny watching him wrestle with the fact that the Tories suggested they would do an extra bank holiday if we won, and being like, no, it's White Boy Summer. It's not work shirk summer.
Yeah, a key part of White Boy Summer is going to work at the office. Yeah. Not working from home and working all 5 work days.
Because that's what those crazy ass white boys, they love doing extra hours for no pay.
It's true.
For the service of the economy and the British family.
Keir Starmer, I guess, you could usher a White Boy Summer. No.
Keir Starmer, hands on hips, why don't you try busting it down work style?
He's the team leader who fires you but sat backwards in the chair.
Efficiency'd up white boy busts it down work style.
It's going to be, oh my God, that's going to live in my head for a while.
I just have a gift for coming up with these things.
Well, look, no, the real White Boy Summer hobby, I guess, or like thing to do is to learn like fluent Mandarin, right?
Yeah.
Of course. Doesn't get much more White Boy Summer than that.
Well, yeah, because then like imagine the restaurant owners you'll shock.
Remember that children's book?
The wait staff you'll surprise with your fluent Mandarin. I think one more White Boy Summer thing, which is that on our agenda for White Boy Summer, I have one more item.
This is the problem with not having Milo on, is that without him in the back of the class to like divert us from the thing, we all divert from the thing.
We don't like to admit it, but we like to be diverted from the thing. That I'm like, oh, come on, back on track. But now, I think with no inmates in the asylum, we have checked ourselves in. I was going to say it's that we're drinking lean, but it's lean Six Sigma, actually.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay.
All right. That's enough of that.
So settle down.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Come on.
There's always one person in the class that always over-eggs it, always overdoes it. Ruins the fun for everyone else.
Yeah, substitute teacher genuinely upset instead of like playfully upset.
Look. Before we talk about the beginning of the 1,000-year white boy summer of Keir Starmer, I wanted to revisit.
Better than the last time somebody tries to do 1,000-year white boy summer. I'll say that.
Oh, God. Oh, my. I wanted to revisit some old friends before we talk about that because, look, there's no way it fits in easily, but my God, is it satisfying when companies that we say are going to go out of business go out of business.
Oh, is it another episode of We Were Right watch?
We've been right about EVs for a while, and not like electric vehicles are bad, certainly not. It's like fine to have an electric vehicle, but we've seen that the way that they're delivered by companies that are structured like startups, which suck, frequently have a habit of going bankrupt.
Yeah, it's largely scams is the problem with EVs, unless you buy a Chinese one.
Yeah, exactly. So remember we talked about a couple of years ago, Trevor Milton and the company Nikola. To refresh your memory, it was demonstrated as functional in an investor presentation when it was in fact just rolled down a hill.
I was going to say, that's what I remember Nikola for, yes.
Yeah. So Fisker was another company we talked about on that episode as here are all of the crazy electric car companies, none of which are going to succeed.
Did it not succeed?
Well, it's now officially filed for bankruptcy protection. It was going to for a while.
In many ways, the Nina Power of electric vehicle companies then.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of her writing was actually just her rolling under her own power down a hill.
In so many ways.
So basically, yes, the vehicles were found to have serious build quality shortcomings, software issues, a less than responsive central touchscreen. But now owners have been asking themselves, what's going to happen when the car eventually bricks because no one's updating the software anymore?
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. Just not including any kind of right to repair or any kind of transparency about how these things are made or maintained. That's fine because you lock people into your kind of walled garden ecosystem. And when everything goes wrong, don't worry about it. You now have a very, very expensive paperweight. But I tell you what, you can weigh down a fuckload of paper with an EV. So,
well, actually, no, you'd think you can because the EV is big. But because of the structure of a car, you can weigh down a maximum of 4 piles of paper.
Yeah, okay, sure.
It will not be better than that.
One massive sheet of paper, the sort of size and dimensions of a car wheelbase.
Look, I'm not going to tell you how to use your new paper. You used to have a car. You now have a paperweight. I'm not going to tell you how to use it. If you want to weigh down a bunch of billboards that you're saving up outside under a car, then be my guest. You don't have to do the sensible thing and weigh down 4 separate stacks of normal, non-silly paper.
3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri under an EV. I never saw that movie. I don't know if that's offensive or not.
I assume that's what it's about.
Probably.
At the same time, Lordstown Motors has also filed for bankruptcy.
Oh, those guys. Yeah. We also said they were a scam. Yeah. I mean, the thing about all this is there's a lot of uses for a dead EV besides paperweight. For instance, 4 chairs. Mm-hmm. You could use the glove box for stuff, assuming that isn't locked to an app.
4 chairs don't talk to each other, though.
Yeah. 4 sort of facing forward chairs.
Yeah. You know what it is? You could do a drive-in at your home. You could project a video onto your garage door. How about that?
Yeah, you could use it. You could use the trunk as a kind of a keepsake box, like you used to make in woodwork.
Yeah,
any number of things.
You could practice driving in a really low stakes way.
The radio might still work, and I say might. So you have a massive radio.
Why? Wait, there's the most obvious thing for it, which is you could turn it into one of those what do you call it? Those those types of YouTubers that just film in their cars.
Oh yeah,
they just rent in their cars.
You're a soundstage. Yeah, absolutely.
You have a content creation studio right there.
Buying a dead electric vehicle instead of a kind of £10 backdrop thing to film my YouTube videos.
Yeah, and then when you get really big, you can buy one of in the old films where they sort of have the automatic backdrop and to sort of so you can sort of bring that back where you're sitting stationary in the car but you're pretending you're driving while also sort of doing your racist rant.
Recording a sort of racist rant to camera, both hands in frame and off the wheel at all times, and you're ostensibly going 90 miles an hour.
Yeah. Oh my God. Driving 90 miles an hour through the Old West? Wow. How'd that happen? Yeah. The other thing, of course, is hey, maybe don't let it slowly decompose in your front lawn because then all those helpful battery chemicals will end up in your garden.
It's one of the wrong answers on the theory test for driving. What should you do when your dead EV's batteries are decaying? And the answer is, of course, throw them in the ocean. It's a safe and legal thrill.
It's often answer C on the test. I don't know why, but it is. The other answer on the driving theory test is, of course, what should you do when your EV that you bought directly from a private company run like a startup on huge amounts of venture capital inevitably goes out of business? Have fun with it.
Weirdly long question. It like goes off the edge of the monitor.
Yeah. Yeah. It covers all the dots on the Scantron, so you can't even fill it in.
Yeah, and the answer is, as you say, be yourself and have fun.
Yeah.
It's really the answer to every question on the theory test, if I'm being fully honest.
Yeah. This is official driving test advice, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. This all comes in because I need to reset my theory test. A little bit of a peek behind the curtain there.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to cover before we get back to the Incurium is, of course, I don't even have notes for this. It's just something that's been in my head. Why is Mark Zuckerberg getting epic? And why is he getting epic in such a specifically 2004 way?
Listen, I know I said this about Macron, right? Who can comprehend the mind of Jupiter? And then it turned out that anyone can easily comprehend the mind of Jupiter, which is why things are going very badly for Macron. But like, I think Mark Zuckerberg really is like Jupiterian in that way. I think none of us are like kind of spiritually large enough to comprehend his thinking, right? If he decides he wants to become a kind of like 2000s epic bacon guy, right? He has the facilities to do that, and none of us are going to know how he arrived at that conclusion.
Wasn't it the case that because Milo basically made this point that he's like the most normal weird tech guy, right?
True,
like
for sure.
All of the rest of them have sort of gone off the rails in very different, bizarre ways. Most of them involving trying to sort of start their own version of the Grey Wolves, or build their own sort of mega cities, or like develop their own cults for like broadly political reasons, right? And Zuckerberg just is completely disengaged. And it's interesting because like a few years ago, there was that whole thing about like, well, is he going to like do a presidential run? And is he going to, and it sort of seemed like he was kind of venturing towards that territory. And perhaps he did it and was just like, yeah, the vibe's pretty off here, not for me.
Which is so reasonable, to be honest. He went to like 2 diners in like Iowa and did the kind of like glad handing everyone. The photos exist.
He must have realized somewhere, which is like, I'm rich, I don't have to deal with this shit.
Yeah, for real.
He was just like, yeah, I can use my money to do whatever I want. Why do I want to deal with this shit? And that's why he's now he's got a perm and he's got like big chains and like...
Yeah, white boy summer.
He's the only one doing it right.
And he's the only one doing it right.
He passed the test that Rishi Sunak failed, right? Which is, okay, on a smaller scale, he's still like a billionaire or whatever. So Rishi Sunak was like, okay, yeah, but what I really want is like the trappings of power and like motorcade and shit like that.
Okay, yeah.
Miserable. Whereas Zuckerberg correctly assessed, if I don't do that, I can just record videos of myself like perfectly hurling a spear through a watermelon.
Okay, I've developed my theory a little bit, right? Which is that in the Sunak period, this is like, Sunak's manager, like a techno manager, right?
Yeah.
But he comes from a world where like accolades and status and like job names and stuff, like, or your CV really matters. And so for him, it's just like, well, no, like, you want to rack up all those, you want to rack up all that stuff. You want to work for the big bank. You want to have like been a sort of MP. You wanted to be prime minister, like all these cool things that like people sort of do your thumbs up on LinkedIn for, right? Not realizing that like no one does that. Like it's only like weird and kind of strange people that do LinkedIn endorsements.
Are you suggesting that Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to get endorsed as Prime Minister on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's my theory.
I believe this intrinsically now on a deep like spiritual level.
I've got like a bunch of friends. I've got like a few friends who are management consultants who still really believe in like what they do as sort of being valuable. And like they love fucking posting on LinkedIn. They love posting their job promotions. Like they're really into that stuff. But Zuckerberg has sort of calculated that none of that really matters anymore. Everything's going to shit. No one cares if you sort of like have those accolades. No one cares if you're prime minister. No one cares if you're like a congressman. If anything, like people will sort of despise you for it. But if you're just like a cool guy doing epic shit, like, or if you're like sort of perceived to be a cool guy doing epic shit and being normal, like not even doing like the Elon thing of being like a fucking weirdo, like you're better off doing that. And I feel like he's sort of calculated that he may as well have fun and like not be perceived as weird guy as like Elon and Andreessen and stuff.
The thing is, right, like you're so right. I think the psychic wound that precipitated all of that was like Hollywood deciding that this was a man who needed to be portrayed by Jesse Eisenberg. He just kind of like took that and was like, I need to change everything about my being. And he has done. So fair play, you know?
I think I've sort of explored this theory a little bit on Twitter. I think what happened is the PR team that has been making him normal, number one, is not made him normal, but has made him like palatable to people who aren't looking too closely.
It was helpful when he tried to kill Elon Musk. I appreciated that, you know?
It was when he took up Salat and then just effortlessly turned a brick wall into dust with 400 simultaneous punches. No. It's that I think what the PR team rehabilitating him has done is they have restarted his experience of the internet at 1999. And they did that about 6 years ago.
He's discovering like Maddox now.
Yes.
It's gonna get worse. He's a couple of years off of like, you're the man now, dog.
Yeah, he's gonna discover YTMNDs. He's gonna get really into like Favestar. We are 3 years away from Mark Zuckerberg doing like cop starts breakdancing line break jokes.
Yeah. OMG, Jenny.
He's gonna get into Favestar. He's gonna be a tweet decker. He's going to start saying my dude, and he's gonna stop Coney. And I think that's really exciting.
On that basis, you realize in a mere 20 years' time, in a bunker, he's going to be doing like K-Hive bits.
Yeah. Although I think maybe, actually, what about this? His experience, we're workshopping this in real time. I have not a single note on this. What if he is experiencing the internet faster?
You think he's on like a kind of interstellar situation?
Yeah. He's going to pass us, and he's going to be doing K-Hive bits like next year. He's going to be like when Kamala Harris is like halfway into her presidency, he's going to be doing like, hey, the coconut tree, I know about that. Like he's going to be doing like pieces to camera, and he's going to stop like wearing a tuxedo and surfing and like drinking a giant beer. He's going to have left his like bacon shorts in the cupboard. He's going to have like passed his like, my dude, not a good look phase. He's going to have his like make poverty history bracelet. He's going to have his fuck cancer shirt burned. And then he's going to be a K-Hiver, and he's going to go on to something else.
Burning your fuck cancer shirt to indicate your newfound support for cancer.
Yeah, that's right.
Joining the war on cancer on the side of cancer. Doing a reverse fundraiser to make people in hospitals worse.
Yeah, that's the kind of shit he's going to be doing in like 10 years. And we're going to get it like 5 years after.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's what's going to happen.
Well, this sort of like 2030 trend of like reverse fundraisers to make things worse.
Yeah. He's going to be so much of a bigger Mr. Beast than Mr. Beast ever could.
Mm.
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
He's going to take over an actual country and start a real war, like as a social experiment.
Yeah, maybe that's the end game. It's like he's not viewing Elon. Elon wants like Zuckerberg to view him as like his main opponent. But really, like his main opponent is Mr. Beast. And this all ends with like an epic showdown between both of them.
Yeah, it was called Les Enfants Terribles Project.
Yeah, they're all from Brazil, huh?
No, I think that we're getting closer and closer to Mark Zuckerberg, as you say, like declaring Hawaii, I guess, to be his own country, calling it outer heaven. And then we just started on the Metal Gear Solid timeline.
It turns out we had to like send one of our stranger billionaires back in time to before he invented the thing that made him weird.
This is not much more contrived than MGS5, to be honest.
Yeah. The guy who did basically invent Big Shell, Arsenal Gear, we're sending him back to experience time faster than any of us. And he just happens to be in a kind of uncanny valley of not old enough to be retro, but not recent enough to be trendy version of the internet.
I remember when Solid as Snake came out onto the roof of the like Federal Hall wearing the tuxedo and the epic bacon shorts.
Okay, I have to get us back to.
Yeah, this is the thing. Once I've introduced Metal Gear Solid, you need to like start like hitting the shock collar button at some point because I'm not going to stop talking about it.
I will need to break the glass. All right, look, I want to talk a little bit about about the politics. This is obviously like the last episode we're talking about. We're doing this on election day, and I suppose it's worth just like...
It's actually our last politics episode we're ever talking about because like...
Yeah, after this, I'll be dead, and then like Riley, you'll be experiencing like white boy summer, Zane, you'll be in the like cuck chair.
Yeah.
So you won't ever have to hear from us again. If you're like annoyed by this, if you're one of the people on Twitter who's like, oh, trash future, don't worry about it because it's over now.
Yeah, that's right. Because they finally fixed it by getting a Labour government in. What kind of Labour government? Don't worry about it.
We just abolished the podcast, having achieved our political aims of, I don't know, a bit more NHS privatization.
Yeah. So much of this shit has appeared to. We want to talk about stuff coming through a time portal from the late 90s.
Well, Peter Mandelson is here.
Yeah. Well, Starmer getting like the support and backing of the Sun. And like, I'm tired at this point of being like, oh, yeah, well, he lied about this as well, right? It sucks to be like, oh, yeah, the same thing we have to say over and over again, which is he lied. He lies constantly, and most people don't actually like him. And, to them to say, oh, I have the support of the Sun, which just shows how this is a changed Labour Party back in the service of working people. Which working people do you mean? The ones that work for the Sun? Like, what do you mean?
I saw a poll recently that said that Starmer has like the same favorability rating, give or take, as Jeremy Corbyn.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Corbyn, had several years of like every media force in this country trying to convince you he was some kind of mad Romanian communist. Whereas Starmer has gotten like a relatively easy ride and has still arrived at the kind of sunlit uplands of 22%.
Yeah. How on earth?
Well, the only conclusion you can draw is that people just don't give a fuck anymore.
Yeah. I say how on earth rhetorically, but it's like it's the situation in which we now find ourselves is astonishingly, to be honest, to me feels like new territory that we have been edging closer towards, which is after the wave election that brought in the Tories because Labour couldn't respond to the financial crisis. After they got sustained on cheap credit, which is never coming back, by the way. That is gone. That is never coming back. Their stuff will be expensive forever because of climate adaptation. Alone climate adaptation, let alone increased like conflict proneness in the world system.
But politics kind of is over in the sense of like politics as we know it. And we know Labour's going to govern that way too, right? That like it suits them for most people to be like, I don't give a fuck. Nothing I can do can change this. Therefore, like, I'm just not going to worry about it and let these bastards get on with it, which is what they're going to try and do. It's just at a certain point that's going to become unsustainable too. And what follows the like post politics, if you like, the post politics could be really spicy.
And if you want to talk also about things coming through in a time machine from 1997,
Nigel Farage is here.
Yeah, Guardian must have had this article like in a content management system since Partygate, right? Which is Julian Hartley, the head of NHS providers, wants the government to apply, quote, fresh thinking and imagination to how the health service can access potentially billions of pounds in private capital to build new facilities by collaborating with property developers, private healthcare companies, pension funds, drug companies, universities, and local councils. See, the problem with PFI is that too few like jackal vulture companies like Carillion and G4S got to benefit from it. What if we let GlaxoSmithKline build a wing of a hospital and it like beeps if you try to go in and you've had the Moderna vaccine? What if we did that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like PFI, but worse. It's like PFI again. This is PFI 2. Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah, like, oh, also, what if we let private healthcare companies collaborate with the NHS to build hospitals? What do you think they're going to do?
It's fine. Don't worry about it, you know?
And the thing is, we already have that. In Birmingham, there is a hospital that has a private wing that's got like a kind of back and forth deal with the local NHS trust that is creating literally a two-tier system in the same building.
There's already a back and forth thing because like all of like every private hospital in the UK sends patients to the NHS for stuff, including like all the like intensive care stuff.
But look, think about the positive, which is that we'll have a lot more sort of media commissioned where the sort of conceit is you couldn't afford medical care, so you had to go to extreme measures to to sort of get like a routine hospital appointment, which is something that this country is lacking. That type of those types of movies and TV shows. So
it's so true. Like, you know, post politics, it's going to suck in a lot of ways, but it's going to be great for the Omegaverse.
Yeah, I'm finally creating the conditions for a British Breaking Bad. I don't approve of it.
Well, you couldn't do a British Breaking Bad because Walter White would get killed by the concrete roof coming in him in episode 1.
Yeah, that's also right. Like, how come we're saying, oh, we need fresh thinking and imagination?
You've been diagnosed with cancer. You need to do something to pay for your treatment. Roof of hospital collapses, killing Walter White.
It solves the cancer problem. You're not going to die from cancer.
Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg has been doing a fundraiser to give you cancer. Because he thinks it's going to like create entrepreneurship. And to be honest, in the case of Breaking Bad, he would have been right. So
yeah. Yeah. Also, it's like, well, we need fresh thinking and imagination. There are hospitals where if you're overweight, you have to stay on the ground floor. Why do we need fresh thinking and imagination? We need concrete.
This is the thing. Things that are concrete, either literally or metaphorically, just don't figure into the like new changed Labour Party's worldview, you know?
Obviously, we know this is what they're offering. They've made it very clear ever since like 10 minutes after the 2020 leadership election, this is what they're offering and this is all they're going to offer. That the lack of enthusiasm for them it's not surprising, but like that much of the data that gets analyzed is that the party is less well liked than in any previous year since 2015. It's just that the Tories are hated more. Once you are in government, that goes away.
Mm-hmm.
That's gone. Like the Tories figured out a way to trade on people not liking New Labour for like 10 years. Like one treasurer, one secretary, Chancellor of the Exchequer, made one joke about there being no money left. Then there was the just consent. Everyone decided to believe it.
Well, also, like, the other thing is that in some ways they're a victim of their own success because if as it seems now on election day, the Conservative wipeout is so much so that they like cease to be a going concern, right? And the real opposition on the right is reform. Then you don't even have the Tories to kick around anymore. You can, because like Nigel Farage can continue to say that, you know, the Conservatives are terrified of him and they're yesterday's party anyway, you know?
And, you know, I mean, that's, again, what he has the advantage of is like, hey, we've never been in government. You don't know what it's going to be. We can we're not having to trade against any record at all. Just promises. Just wonder. Just whatever you can imagine, we'll do it for everyone forever. And that's what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm. And you can always kind of sheepdog Labour to the right like this. You can always be like, interesting, it's been like 6 months in power and nobody's machine gunning migrant boats yet. And on the off chance Keir Starmer does decide to do that, they'll be like, interesting, you're not using like mortars on the migrant boats instead.
Britain has a lot of anti-materiel rifles.
Yeah, why doesn't the channel look like the kind of vulgar scene from Enemy at the Gates? You know, Why not that?
We have lived so long now in a political system where you are voting against the other guy. Nothing has been promised since except Brexit. And by the way, if you want to talk about fucking Brexit, Mr. Remain, Mr. like, oh,
Mr. Second Referendum, Mr. Lose the 2019 election on the basis of insisting that a second referendum like appear as a manifesto commitment.
Is now saying we will not in my lifetime go back into the European Union. We won't even have a youth exchange program because that looks too much like free movement.
Yeah, the kids can escape, and then who else is going to like eventually have to do all your like low paid labor?
Hey, but think about this: as much as the economy might be absolutely turbo fucked, Steve Bray, job for life.
Well, I think he's the only one that fucking cares. Everybody else who was like Corbyn is a secret Brexiteer, we can never support him. I'm afraid a tactical vote for a Remainer must never go to Labour while Corbyn's in charge of it. We have a guy who's now replicating Theresa May's Brexit policy. Like, that's what we have now. Okay, great. And the only person you hear from about it is fucking Steve Bray, the guy who camped out in front of Parliament and just harasses everybody going by with, like, bewilders tourists with a megaphone. That's the only guy who seems to actually care.
Do you think that he like was briefly granted the gift of prophecy at the time and it was like he was just trying to like get out of the house and was just kind of like, oh boy, looks like another 5 years camping out again, can't come home, sorry.
His wife is desperately waiting for him by the window.
Just like, no, any day now we'll do a second referendum and we'll win. No, sorry, darling. It's they're still Brexited out here.
There are lots of people that actually do care about it. It's like lots of people who are.
Yeah, I mean, I care. Yeah. It fucking sucks, but like at the same time, it's just like I recognize that this is a kind of like path we've been led down, right?
I don't have an opinion either way, except just hey, that thing you said was the worst possible thing that could happen to the country. We're all just agreeing now that the guy is in that it's sort of fine. Or at least it's fine enough to not cause a bother. And it just explains so much of why, at the end of the day, 55% of voters who were, again, polled by YouGov, we're doing a lot of YouGov polling in this episode, were chose like, oh yeah, I don't care a shit about Starmer. 1% of people polled by YouGov said that they had confidence they would fix the cost of living crisis. 1%. 5% of people said they agreed with his policies generally. The rest were I hate the Tories. I would vote for like an inanimate carbon rod to get them out.
Yeah, it's not great, is it?
Even the people who are like, the hard right stuff we hope he fails to do. They're like, they don't even think he'll solve the small boats crisis, quote unquote. Like, we want him to not do that, obviously, but even the people who are quite right-wing don't think he'll do anything.
I would actually like it if Starmer was doing the kind of like long con that he's sometimes accused of, and is like the second he gets in, which is today, by the way. So like maybe today, as of like now, he's like announced that like he's now a Maoist. And like the purges begin 10 minutes from now. We are unilaterally re-entering the EU.
The Maoist unilaterally entering the European Union?
It's called a united front, you right deviationist. And yeah, and like everyone's going to have pronouns now. Maybe, you know?
I would like to announce the dissolution of the United Kingdom. It is a settler colonial project.
Difficult to speak in Maoist standard English when your name has a K and an S in it already.
Ooh, my God.
Keir Starmer.
Yeah, make a placard for that. Keep it in the back just in case. I'm sure it'll be of quite a lot of use for you.
We support our new Maoist Starmer overlord. But also, right, like, I mean, there's sort of so many things just cropping up in the final days of the election where everybody's trying to interview everybody. He's just getting a chance to like talk and talk and talk and talk. This is going to subside, I think, for a while, right? Sort of some of the last Starmerology I hope to do for a bit, unless we're like looking at how he's actually governing. But again, it's like he also is showing himself to be someone who will just like, he will abandon a commitment to a piece of settled legislation if you ask him and raise an eyebrow. Where he's interviewed in the Times and asked a question that J.K. Rowling asked on Twitter, saying,
Jesus Christ.
do biological males with gender recognition certificates have the right to enter women-only spaces? It's a simple yes-no question, Keir. Starmer was emphatic. No, they don't have that right. They shouldn't. That's why I've always said, always. He's always said this, by the way. He's always said that biological women's spaces need to be protected. What does the Labour manifesto say? He's never said any of that, of course. No. He had nothing to do with that.
Between this and Israel, do not ask this guy a yes or no question on what he thinks someone has a right to do. So his answer is like legally incoherent, which is funny for a lawyer. It would like rip up about like 20 years of equality law. And Labour have since sort of quietly clarified that they don't really want to rewrite the Equality Act definition of sex, which means that like, I mean, ultimately, like as extremely depressing and frightening as this is, pre-election, it's all meaningless. Like I'm not going to say I haven't been terrified by all of this, but I think I'm more usefully terrified by the stuff that happens once he's prime minister rather than while he's a candidate. The problem with this, though, is that, like, I keep having this thing, right, whether it's the UK or the US, where I keep coming up with a smart, well-reasoned sort of, like, rationale for why you shouldn't worry so much and things are going to be fine. And then it gets worse again. So, you know, maybe I'm just coping and seething. I don't know.
I mean, there's also the something I've been sort of thinking about a bit, not least because we don't really know at the time of speaking, like, we don't really know, like, what this new government is going to look like or how sort of active they are going to be. But like one of the, and we sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier, which is that like as this sort of becomes a different version of like managerial politics, and we've kind of, I can totally imagine like a lot of the sort of, even the promises that have been made by the Labour Party right now kind of are reneged on the basis of, oh, well, we had a look at the finances and realized that actually we couldn't afford to fix the potholes actually. So like,
there's no money for bathroom cops. I mean, this is the thing. When Chairman Starmer sends us all to the fields, not a lot of men's or women's toilets in the fields.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, again, like I've mentioned this a lot of times, but like, you know, the sort of bathroom discourse in this country really does ignore the fact that a lot of the public bathrooms here really fucking suck. They never work. I went to a hospital of a maternity ward like the other week, and there was one working bathroom. And like, when I say working, it means you could go into there, but the flush wasn't working. This is in a maternity ward of a hospital. Right?
Statistically, one of the most likely like women's spaces, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, but if you're like got the unwilling, or if you're really hoping that fucking G4S comes in and fixes the toilet, I mean, I guess you could then turn them into toilet jails. That would probably be an effective way of doing it. But the point being that like, as they sort of renege on even the sort of lukewarm promises they've made, what is really left in terms of like how politics is kind of defined, and I think in this first Starmer period, is really by the affect around it. And what you're going to have is like a mix of kind of populist firebrands in parliament that like have a lot of sway over a very vicious and cruel media culture that we've sort of seen little slivers of in the like Boris, once like Boris got elected with like GB News and everything, I imagine that's going to really, really get worse. But also like the lack of a kind of coherent opposition sort of means that potential for chaos is a lot more likely to kind of flourish in quite surprising, and I wouldn't be surprised if pretty like violent ways. And so it's like, it doesn't, the idea that like the government is sort of going to sort of not even fix problems, but like kind of ameliorate all the sort of catastrophes that the Tories have caused. Like, yeah, they might do some sort of cosmetic stuff, but I think the thing that's really going to define this first period is like the types of politics that kind of occur outside of the sort of parliamentary system, and how these will be less likely to be controlled. Right?
You're sorry. It's a cultural thing first, right? And the Labour Party is having it's sort of like the dog being wagged by its tail on this one, right? But like again, the thing is like, irrespective of like, because changing the law is very, very hard and very, very boring, and a lot of people don't want to do it. This is another like cope, by the way, just to be clear. But like, what it is doing is it's enabling and it's reinforcing the same kind of stochastic, often violent kind of like prejudices, right? Like, obviously, like as far as like me going into the like women's bathroom, right? First of all, there's the question of me finding one. But second of all, if you're sort of like, if you've already changed the law, which is presumably a pretty like arduous process in order to make it so that I can't be in there, you're then, I guess, citizens arresting me, and then we all wait 10 hours for the one cop left to turn up.
It's like that cop is on a patrol of bathrooms.
Yeah.
Which is like exactly what they used to be doing in like the 70s as well. Like we're bringing that back.
Yeah, but like, no, what you're not really aiming at doing that. What you're aiming at doing is making it more likely for like someone who has been driven insane by the internet to like confront me and kick the shit out of me while filming on their phone.
It's like volunteer border guards, volunteer toilet cops. Like that's kind of what the culture is going to. That, we sort of see it heading towards that direction in some instances. We see this happening a lot more in like, mainland Europe, right? Germany, like being a really big example of this. So I wouldn't be surprised if like, again, one of these sort of uncontrolled, or like one of these forces that like the Starmer administration is not going to be able to control, because their version of like sensible grown-up politics completely ignores the fact that like this is the type of political energy that is kind of about to emerge, like very chaotic, very external. I feel like that we're sort of going to see a lot more very chaotic like citizen policing of lots of like the remaining public institutions.
You're under a citizen's arrest. Put your hands on the toilet and prepare to die.
What's crucial, I think, here, especially about this, like, oh, J.K. Rowling, you object. Don't worry. I, the putative prime minister, and he'll do it again when he's prime minister, probably, well, also am willing to like say, I'm fine with ignoring this long-standing piece of equalities legislation, which, number one, that's demonstrating to me, I think, an enormous amount of like personal weakness, because that's like, oh, is a columnist about to ask me a confrontational question? Better fold, better promise to like have a beer summit with J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, you might not care about trans people, but like, if he's going to fold for us, he's going to fold for whatever it is you have going on too.
Yeah, and moreover, it's also like, I think what you're both talking about like, this is also a kind of stochastic incitement, which is a willingness to be like, oh yeah, the law, it's like when you have a burned out EV that's not getting updated anymore. Just have fun with it. Just be yourself.
Starmer's Britain, gangs of roving turfs kicking dents in the side of a dead EV by the side of the road.
Yeah, where it's like a law is a law, but it has to be supported.
You have to have the state capacity to enforce it.
A law is a law. You have to have the state capacity to enforce it. And if there's going to be something like a piece of equalities legislation, it has to have the constant moral support of people in power. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's not going to work if everyone powerful signals, oh, we don't care about this actually. We don't give a shit.
Yeah.
It's going to not be worth the paper it's printed on. And, again, whether knowingly or unknowingly, he's doing this so that the Harry Potter lady won't get mad at him. He's doing this because he doesn't want people to get mad at him.
Yeah, do you want to be friends with a woman who posts 16 hours a day about how much she hates trans women? Does she sound like a fun hang? Does she sound cool to you?
She should get married to Bill Ackman, I think. I think that they would have such a good vacation together. Just both of them in Laura Loomer's mentions from like
just like in bed on their phones separately. Yeah.
In like the world's like in a mansion on a Caribbean island that's so luxurious it's not on the map. All of the pleasures of the world arrayed at your feet.
So I saw a photo of J.K. Rowling's yacht, right? And like, if I had a yacht, let alone her yacht, which is a big fucking yacht, right? you could not, like, there is very little you could do to entice me to care about anything. And I consider myself a, like, more, like, community involved person than her, right? So she's just fully, like, it's just deranged stuff. And she can't even enjoy any of the billionaire stuff. She's making herself miserable by doing this.
She should learn from Mark Zuckerberg about, like, doing white boy.
For real.
J.K. Rowling, do your white boy summer. You'll really enjoy it. Like, you know.
This is an official, like, call from Trash Future, the podcast. J.K. Rowling, embrace white boy summer, you know? Cut to, like, 60 replies from her about how actually I'm the one who needs to embrace white boy summer.
But finally, last thing we'll talk about on labor before we move on is, you say one insider with knowledge of the party's growth plan. By the way, all of this is like, it's all Kremlinology, right? We don't know what's actually going on in there. Right now,
secret Maoism. Comrade Streeting is preparing, even as we speak, the shock brigades.
It's not left, it's not right.
Streeting.
It's a secret third way.
Yeah. Wes Creeding.
Yeah, there's a weird handshake meme between Tony Blair and Mao, you know?
But, right, is everything we're talking about is like, we don't know how much like bloodletting and backroom deal making and glad handing is going on at the Labour Party right now. I know that they're all having a great fucking time. They're all getting to play out their little fantasies. Yeah, they're so excited that they get to betray each other. And it's like actually meaningful. Or at least as meaningful as British politics can be.
Kind of like the magic wand turned up to maximum, just like this is just like the West Wing. Sure, perfect.
Yeah.
And you know, I wish them every happiness with it, to be honest.
Yeah, they should just play diplomacy.
New Victoria DLC just dropped. You know,
one insider with knowledge of the party's growth plan suggested there could be, quote, pretty hair-raising stuff ahead, saying there will have to be almost trust-like deregulation on things like planning and free ports. We're gonna do that again.
This is the plan. This is the fucking plan, is like, we're gonna try and do the cabbage lady shit without scaring the like bond markets.
Yeah. We're gonna try to do the Liz Truss thing, which everyone admits was fucking mental, but we're going to do it good.
And also the OBR won't let them do it because, again, like the thing is, even if they wanted to do something like that, like, and again, I mean, I guess like he could sort of break it, but like one of the sort of like one of the sort of things that he said, or they said, to sort of get the Sun support, I suppose, was, well, every costing we do, we'll sort of pass it through the OBR. And like, when has the OBR or the IFS or any of these fucking places ever said, yeah, you should spend stuff, right? Like, their ideology is still very much rooted in austerity because they are a product, or at least like the OBR is sort of a product of an austerity project. And so again, it's like, well, okay, how are you going to do this?
Oh, I can tell you that, which is that the source says planning and free ports, the craziest stuff that will have the least effect.
Everywhere is a free port now. Congratulations, citizen. You live in like Neo-Britain Freeport Zone 800, formerly known as Stockport.
Yeah. The Confederation of Hackney and the two Bethnal Greens has declared war on...
This sounds pretty good, actually. I'm kind of in favor of this one, actually, yeah.
Yeah, what, you think we should do more like a condottieri, like roving bands of mercenaries?
I'm willing to become some kind of like corporate ninja warrior mercenary in the service of like, you know, the Glasgow Freeport.
Yeah, but that's the problem. We're going to get like, let's say...
South Shields, a subsidiary of the Arasaka Corporation.
Yeah, we're gonna get that, but we're not gonna get Trauma Team. Like that's never. We're never gonna get Trauma Team because that's too good care.
It was my favorite part of that game. It was really conceptually, it was really good. And this is the thing. This is the kind of like innovative private sort of healthcare initiative that you can bring to the NHS once you kind of like open that door, you know? What if there was one ambulance left? It cost 600,000 quid to call it, and everyone on board had a railgun.
Also, it flies. It's the ambulance. It's the ambulance.
We're just combining existing startups. That's ambulance crossed with the hover taxi that crashes into your building,
and crossed with the hydrogen powered railgun that was invented by the 3-year-old.
It's all coming together. All the technologies are there on the table for Trauma Team to be real.
Unfortunately, it's also based on crypto, so it will take them 90 hours to get there. So I want to finish up on what may initially seem like a startup segment, but might not be. The company is called Halo Solutions.
Master Chief, where are you going with that VC funding?
I'm going to give the Covenant back their Series B. Halo I've done a couple of those recently. Halo Solutions, let's protect everyone.
Okay.
So rather than doing all the guessing, right, I'll just go into tell you what it is. It is an incident management platform designed for a world-leading client base, experts in the field, and unique features. So it is essentially, it is like a really common type of product that aggregates a whole bunch of security information into one screen.
Oh, sure. So if you're managing like Wembley, right, it shows you simultaneously like how many drunk, unticketed fans are trying to like kick down each turnstile.
Yeah, it will show you the location of the guy with the flare up his ass at any given time.
But it's like AI enabled to really like lock onto. It's seen so many pictures of that guy with a flare up his ass. It can identify him instantly.
It just becomes sentient and believes it is the guy with the flare up his ass. So there was a police officer in 2014 called Lloyd Major who started just like a normal security consulting company that started working at like festivals. And then after the Manchester Arena bombing in 2017, said, okay, we're going to work to stop anything like that from happening again.
Yeah, if only there had been a kind of like sort of oversight platform that seeing that guy walk into the crowded auditorium had identified him as a guy with a flare up his ass.
Or also like, oh yeah, if only there had been like some kind of a national security state that was, I don't know, tracking the guy that did it. Anyway,
yeah.
So he creates this thing, right, which is used at like, which is, as we say, right, like something that just aggregates lots of information so you can see what's happening where, what kind of incidents are going on. This is relatively common, and like in as much as anything is innocuous, pretty innocuous.
Yeah, well, like when you're looking at the kind of like surveillance cameras following you everywhere thing, the kind of like, it's not particularly objectionable in itself to be like, they're using software that lets them watch a bunch of screens at once kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, other than like the fact that allows, I always think like, when you're thinking about information.
That guy in the middle of the panopticons wearing glasses.
Yeah, a little bit. Or it's like that guy in the middle of the panopticon has like a bunch of mirrors that allow him to look at all of the cells at once and without having to turn. They're defeating the purpose of the panopticon, really. But essentially, right, it's when you think of yourself as like giving off information, you have to understand like the more that gets aggregated with other people who are in some category similar to you, whether that's people who are co-located with you, people who share a demographic with you, people who might share a set of political beliefs with you, people, any characteristic that you can have in common with someone else, the more you can be observed alongside them, the more the person observing you has power over you with respect of that thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of like intelligence like analysis is like making connections between like data you've collected, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that just sort of automates that process and is a British company that's like sold to a lot of other sort of British organizations.
This is the point at which a sort of more centrist podcast would do the kind of like all wells that ends well joke and like waggle their eyebrows, right?
So what I think is worth talking about here is that they have an education offering saying, from boisterous events at the student union to quiet in corners of the library, overseeing the safety and security of a campus comes with many challenges and obstacles. A proactive approach in operations reduces risk and maximizes the value of your services.
We can identify an entire Palestine solidarity camp as guy with a flare up his ass in a matter of microseconds.
You point that out, November. This is why I wanted to talk about this company, because it connects to a couple of things that I think are worth discussing. And I think it's something we're going to see, we've seen a lot of in Britain and we're going to see a lot more of, which is as the semi-public sector, like universities, for example, has like increased needs for security and more importantly, increased demands placed on it by the state to engage in like political policing, so to speak, there's going to be a melding of private capital, in this case, like a company started by a guy, a relatively small company, a university, and then the security state and the police.
Yeah, and until you're at the point where you're like, why do my uni's security guards know as much about me as like MI5 do?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not like tools like this or like sort of more less automated, more human versions of this kind of process don't exist already, right? It's just a question of them being broadened out to like what you might call non-state actors, right?
Exactly. It's the company, this is a press release. And by the way, like none of this is happening in secret. It's just not talked about because it only happens in press releases. And those press releases only go out to like Safety Management Magazine Quarterly or whatever.
Yeah, about which you can learn a lot by reading those.
Yeah, where do you think like 20% of the content of this show comes from. I just read the press releases. The information's out there. There's just so much of it. It's hard to know what's relevant. This company is providing technology to Birmingham City University. It's in discussions with a number of other universities in the UK. This is the press release. Following growing concerns about female safety on campus, criminal activity, and a spate of non-student protester activity in protest over the war in Gaza.
Going to identify outside agitators, and we're going to protect women and girls. This is all like very, very familiar language as far as this stuff goes.
I think Birmingham City University was also one of those, like when Prevent was sort of talked about a lot, it was like one of those, because I think a PhD student who was doing a research project on like, ironically, like surveillance of counter-extremism on campuses, like ended up getting reported to Prevent because they took out a book on like terrorism or something like that. I think it was at Birmingham City University, all of which is to say that like very sort of like interesting and convenient. And the thing that I was thinking about when you were sort of talking about this, because I think in the mid 2010s, there was this, there were these events on like student campuses in London anyway, I'm not sure if it happened anywhere else, which was called like Students Against Surveillance. And it was the idea that like Prevent had just sort of been expanded. And the idea was that like anyone who had like any sort of like public position, and that ranged from like someone, you know, a university administrator, or like a secretary, or someone who was like, you know, just kind of working in the medical center, for example, had a duty to like report anyone who they sort of considered to be like at risk of, you know, sort of being extremist or sort of on the verge of it. And like this sort of frameworks for that were really, really broad, but it relied on like expanding the scope of snitching and kind of like telling like public administrators that like if you kind of refuse to do this, then your job is also at risk as well. And so clearly like the extension of this now is that, well, clearly like despite that sort of expansion of actual surveillance against students, this still isn't enough. And so in a weird way, it's kind of like, okay, so now we're going to introduce a type of, I presume, like an AI assisted technology that will do the job that like people who were sort of coerced into doing it weren't able to do effectively enough.
So this involves some mention of AI, but I think that's just because they want to increase their valuation. Like I don't see much evidence of it, or there's very little information available is what I'm trying to say. I'm sure there's some of the usual in it. I think in this case, though, it doesn't even matter if it has AI, because the more a security platform can integrate data feeds and spit you out one coordinated number that will allow you to take action, the longer your lever is against people you're trying to control. And so Lloyd Major says, well, legitimate protests are allowed to take place in the cornerstone of every vibrant, thriving democracy. I love that. Whilst load-bearing whilst.
Well, we do have to like allow some level of protest to legitimize our kind of like democracy.
You are allowed to protest against like if the canteen of the university like has served fish fingers like 3 times in a week.
You're allowed to do the kind of like the last ditch protests of like the Russian anti-war movement. You can hold up like a blank sheet of A4 paper on your own.
You can do referendums.
The Russian anti-war left doing a referendum against the special military operation. Just like they beat the shit out of a lot of dogs in the course of the Russian referendum. It was really bad.
Yeah, I tried to take my Excel bully to the last referendum and they were just...
oh my God, is that Steve Bray has been spotted at the University of Coventry? The recent barricade over Gaza at the University of Manchester, which was carried out by a large group of protesters, many of whom are not students, has highlighted how vulnerable UK universities are to such actions.
You're not allowed to have like a position on stuff that the University of Manchester is doing or saying or investing in if you're not paying them $9,000 a year. Like, the university isn't a public institution. It's a kind of like, you know, real estate fund and kind of Ponzi scheme.
It's whatever it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a real estate fund. It's also a classroom.
You as someone who like maybe like lives in Manchester or who lives in Britain, you don't really like your opinion of what like any given university might be doing is kind of irrelevant, ideally. I understand that sometimes people graduate universities, right? Like, and maybe they still have opinion. They like, you know, they'd maybe send them like a newsletter, you know, they maybe kind of like are alive to issues of like governance of the university. Just as long as you don't do that in any kind of like protest related way.
You should interact with the university by donating to them. And you can maybe find a special number you can donate that signals disapproval, but is still ample.
Buy a scarf at the gift shop, but shake your head the whole time so that they know that you disagree with it.
One of the reasons I'm talking about this as well is there was recently an article published by Liberty Investigates, so the law firm, the sort of civil rights law firm, on email exchanges with police. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not connecting any of this to Halo. None of the universities here explicitly use Halo, and Halo doesn't say they cooperate with the police. They give information to the university can choose what to do with it. It's just, I'm saying that's one example of like an increased ability to surveil.
Yeah, it's all working in kind of like an incestuous ecosystem generally, even if we can't like make actual connections between those things.
And on the other side of the universities are state organizations which are demanding that they all work together. So this is a quote from the investigation by Liberty. In one email forwarded by North Yorkshire Police to the head of campus safety at York University, a former police officer said of an unnamed female protester, "She came to our attention during the anti-monarchy protest during the King's visit in York. Is it possible to find out if she's a current student of the uni and any address details that she holds?" The force also highlighted that campus protesters had chanted "From the river to the sea" and 5678 Israel is a terrorist state. On May 21st, campus security said it was keeping a log monitoring general mood and behavior of the York encampment, lamenting senior management's decision against installing CCTV.
Yeah, because all of this stuff kind of exists irrespective of what university bureaucrats choose to do about it. Like if you're kind of like, if you successfully move your 750 grand a year vice chancellor to not deploy the kind of like predator drone over your encampment, it doesn't matter. They still employ a staff of people who are going to be like emailing the cops about you.
And earlier that month, the National Police Chiefs Council's neighborhood policing lead contacted all police forces asking for intelligence on any students, quote, replicating American campus protests. An email sent from Gloucestershire Constabulary to the Royal Agricultural University in Cirencester suggests. Number one.
Imagining that protest encampment. Like,
yeah. People with 19 last names who are accidentally starting a protest encampment because they drank a mixture of port and piss.
That might be the first, like, Palestine solidarity campaign that actually is motivated predominantly by anti-Semitism. Just like cutting a kind of like the triangle and the Palestinian flag out of your red trousers.
Yeah. And also it's like, but this is cooperation again and again and again, where like university security asks officers to like join them in the control room to monitor CCTV during protests.
Yeah. It's very similar to like a lot of police intelligence in the US and the UK is a waste of time, right? It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, but it is kind of a jobs program, right? You look at like US stuff like fusion centers, right? Which exist largely to regurgitate myths from Facebook to scare other cops. Time and time again in 2020 and later, you saw these fusion centers which are intended to do just this, right? To share intelligence, to collate intelligence and disseminate it outwards. Doing things like, hey, does anyone have any information on the bus full of Antifa that's coming to like a small town to start a forest fire?
What set you from?
Because we have read about this on Facebook, we are like putting out a kind of alert generally to maybe like, you know, without considering its sort of like evidence base, you should be aware of and afraid of the idea that like a bus full of Antifa are going to show up and they're going to like fire an RPG full of dildos at you or whatever. Whereas, and it's exactly the same in this country too. It's just like slightly more obscured because we have more of a kind of a security state around it.
Yeah, well, because there's also, this is interlinking with Prevent, right? And
yeah,
this is saying like,
which is an extremely like hysteric organization to be like, this kid, like, you know, drew a picture of like a stick guy with a gun in his notebook and is therefore like presumably pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
And like, this is what I sort of see here is a willingness on the, if we go back to like how people interpret the law and how so much of the law is what people think it is, because it depends who's enforcing it at any given day. It's not illegal to say from the river to the sea. It's not illegal to say 5678 Israel is a terrorist state. That's not illegal. But all these police forces, all of the, well, not the Met for reasons we've discussed, but other police forces, other like semi-private security organizations, universities, and so on, are all acting like it is. And like they can't send you to jail, but they can refer you to this like quasi-institutional, sort of formal, very vague like state surveillance program that will repeatedly fuck your life up.
Yeah, even before the kind of latest round of legislation on this, like intelligence gathering was always something that was like deliberately, for exactly this reason, extremely vague and extremely unaccountable. Right. And to sort of ask what information the police or Prevent or the security services or whatever kind of like agglomeration of policing that becomes like counter-terror policing or like shared intelligence units or whatever hold about you, it's like almost impossible. You know, it's also kind of just relies on people not caring. in the main that this is a thing that happens, which, most people don't give a shit, which is also grim.
Yeah. Well, look, I think what we're going to see is, of course, we elected a Labour government. So they're going to put a stop to that, right? I assume that's how that's going to go.
This kind of intelligence work is absolutely a growth industry, probably will be a growth industry everywhere going forward. And it's very self-perpetuating is the thing. Like, does this create a lot of useful intelligence? Arguably not, but it does create a lot of jobs for people to keep doing this and to keep monitoring people who the state feels more comfortable when they're monitored.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think that's about all we have time for today. So I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the new Imperium, and that you're ready to enjoy the new flesh, the new very square Lego haired flesh.
Oh, you got a license for that flesh?
Yeah. Oh, you got a license for that video? Do you want a Videodrome license? Going to jail because I didn't pay my TV license for Videodrome. Okay, all right. That's enough silliness now. Thank you for listening to this free episode of TF. Don't forget, there's a bonus that we coming out in a couple days. Guess what it is? It's finally the live show we did about Liz Truss's autobiography. That's what it's going to be.
It's 10 years to save the West, which at this point is like 9 years, 10 months to save the West.
We have so little time to save the West. So that's coming. That's coming this week. So do check that out. And yeah, I guess we will see you in a few days. Maybe we still have Edinburgh tickets. I don't know. I guess you're going to have to check in the episode description. It'll say.
Do your own legwork for once.
Yeah, hey, you know what? Why don't you find out if there are Edinburgh tickets? I'm not. You can't have me to kick around anymore. Okay, all right. I actually have to go. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.